participate in each other and the land's growth. Action takes investment, care, and intention. Shireen and I, and Find Help in 211 Toronto, our intention today is to support the learning and opening of the Data for Change Capacity Building Learning Series, starting with organizational readiness. This will create a foundation rooted in a commitment of developing and embracing strong connections with you all in support of our Indigenous communities. Our strength is interwoven in our ability to guide each other through the waters of change and the unwavering support we offer to one another as we all navigate and fight for social justice and health equity within our community. Wade Davis notes, change itself does not destroy a culture. All societies are constantly evolving. Indeed, a culture survives when it has enough confidence in its past and enough say in its future to maintain its spirit and essence through all its changes it inevitably will undergo. We must never forget, ne jamais oublier. Thank you, merci, and miigwech. And back to you, Kosal.
Thank you so much, Nicole. What a wonderful land acknowledgement, and a really great open for us to come together this afternoon to launch what we know as Data for Change, or formerly known as the Be Yourself, See Yourself project. So thank you so much for many of you who were able to join us today. And we come to the community social services sector today with the new model of engagement with many of you. As we've heard through our last round of learnings, there were ways in which we can enhance the learning opportunities for our sector. So I wanted to, just before we start the actual capacity building opportunity this afternoon, just to share with the big picture of where we're going this year with this project. And this model of Find Help 211 hosting the project on behalf of the sector for many of us who are on this learning journey of collecting social identity data. This we bring this year with many new partners, 3 of them who you're seeing here on your chart. CASA, which stands for Council of Agencies Servicing South Asians, SHIP, this afternoon's workshop lead, Services and Housing in the Province, and Logical Outcomes. Each community partner that's coming to the table plays a different role, as you can see here on this chart. And many of us here are here to just learn. And we hope that you come to this table with our partners here to embrace both the learning opportunities, which are formal opportunities, and also the community of practice, which is the informal engagements with each other. And what we hope to launch next time around is also an online learning portal, where materials that we collect today and throughout the series, throughout the year, will be hosted and put up there for many of us to go back to and revisit whenever we need the resources. And so we're happy to present that this year as a new element. Can I ask just for the next slide, please? So as you heard me mention, this is a full year opportunity for many of us to come and revisit on a monthly basis the learning opportunities, both from a formal way of engagement, which will be led by SHIP and Logical Outcomes in the sessions throughout the year, and also an opportunity to come back as the community of practice to reinforce the learnings with one another through the materials that we learn on a monthly basis. And so we're staging these learning opportunities as a natural way in which the sector works with data for equity and the data and in a change process. So stage 1 being plan and build, and a series of learnings related to that stage of building out data collection. Stage 2 will be collect and store, which will be a very content focused and very technical conversation around how we collect and store data. And third, which was an element that was missing last time around, and we were really happy to bring back and reinforce on a much stronger element, which is analyze and interpret. So for that, we thank many of you who provided that feedback. And then finally, the stage 4, which is share and use. So all of our capacity building partners here are here to help reinforce the learning stages. And we really hope that by today's opening session, and we hope to see that you return throughout the year and engage with us in many ways. So that's our opportunity. And I'm going to hand it back to our presenters today, Nicole and Shireen, to take us through the first learning session. And can I ask, if folks are unmuted right now and you're not a presenter, I ask that if you can be muted, or our facilitators in the back and will also mute you as well, just to remain respectful of the presenters. So thank you so much. And the floor is back to you, Nicole and Shireen, for your own formal introductions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, we are so excited to be here today. My name is Nicola Bruscato. I go by pronouns she, her, and I'm the manager of Central and Taken Access here at Services and Housing in the province. Some of you may know us by our former name, Supportive Housing and Peel, which we changed in 2017 to really align with the work that we do in the province of Ontario now. So I'll now have Shireen introduce herself, my
Good
esteemed colleague.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shireen Ramprasad. My pronouns are she, her, and I have the privilege of being the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Manager here at SHIP as well. We're looking forward to sharing our experiences with you this afternoon. So I will give it back to Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you. So, a couple of guiding principles for learning. So, I see that some things came in the chat, which is great. We do have a formal section at the end for question and answer. So, if you have anything that pops up throughout the presentation, please place it into the chat and we'll make sure that we address it later on. And if not during this session, we'll make sure afterwards as well. So, always great to have that engagement there. So some guiding principles for today's learning is we really want to hold space. So knowing that we're all busy, we have a lot of things on the go, but we're really going to get what we put into it. So holding the space to learn and to invite new knowledge into our space. We're going to embrace and acknowledge our vulnerability. We all don't know all the things. We're all not experts in this area, but how can we support and inform one another? Be encouraged to practice what is learned. So once we have all this knowledge that we're learning throughout the series, through all of the capacity organizations that are a part of this, how do we then practice what we learn? And that will then be innate in what we do. Agree to disagree and be present. Some objectives today for Shireen and I is to really highlight the need for data for equity, what needs to change to become more equitable, and bringing it all together through a readiness assessment. So a little bit more about SHIP in case people are not aware of our organization. We just wanted to highlight a little bit about us. So the top left-hand corner is our organization's main office. And our mission is that we work to support those with mental health and addiction challenges to increase their quality of life and live to their full potential through safe, affordable, community-based housing and services. Our vision is quality housing, quality services, and quality lives. And I'm sure everyone loves their acronyms at their organizations. Our values are CHIRP, C for compassion, H for hope, I for inclusion, R for respect, and P for professionalism. And everything that we do is guided by those values. We are a nonprofit accredited through Accreditation Canada housing and health service provider for over 30 years. And we deliver services in Etobicoke, Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon, Dufferin County, and most recently, Waterloo region. We're also highlighted as the best nonprofit employer for diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2023 and the nonprofit employer of choice in 2024. Our business model, so key areas of our business is through housing and homelessness, clinical health and wellness, which is where my team falls under Central and Taken Access, and then housing and development, housing development and innovation. We have different enterprise functions that really help guide the work through communication, equity, diversity, and inclusion, finance, human resources, our strategy and risk management, and quality and privacy. And this is all funneled into our strategic plan, which is building blocks for a better for a better tomorrow, which again will support Ontario. But again, it's really helping to make sure that we're adapting, building, and creating all that we do in keeping in mind our community that is accessing our services and should guide our services. We also have a client and family engagement framework, which is really important to showcase the need for this and the importance. And we actively work with clients and their families so that we can promote a collaborative approach to the services. And we also fall under and really adopt the importance of nothing about me without me. So when we're putting in key practices, key policies, strategies, our key performance indicators, we're really making sure that we're guiding it in the work by those who are affected by it. Our service model is unique in that we have that supportive housing function and look at it from a wraparound service model. And it's integrated again through housing and services to benefit the well-being of our clients and their families. And so it's based on a continuum and it can ebb and flow based upon the need. And it's also looking at how do we coordinate that access as a one-stop shop for folks needing our services. So really wrapping around housing, our supports, community integration, looking at food security, looking at social purpose enterprise for employment for our clients, and then looking at tenancy and maintenance support so that they have healthy housing to live in, and then look at other social determinants of health to support them through an health equity and justice lens. And again, sorry, this is very fast because the meat and potatoes is coming up in our presentation. The continuum of our services is really looking at housing from a high intensity to a low intensity. And so we aim to address the issue of homelessness by providing that spectrum of housing and services here at SHIP for those who have any mental health considerations or challenges. And so we go all the way from emergency shelters where we have Peel Family Shelter, we have different safe beds locations, shelters and transitional housing in Waterloo. And then a subsection of transitional housing where we have it for youth, for adults. We have Peace Ranch, which is a farm for those who are diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it really looks at horticulture, art therapy, animal therapy that can really showcase the complexity of a schizophrenia diagnosis, but through a really integrated and wraparound supportive approach to housing. We have independent housing as well as 2 homes that we support with through Community Homes for Opportunity, and then affordable market rent. So really looking at how someone can move throughout those areas through autonomy and through a wellness recovery model. So SHIP's approach to EDI, and Shireen, did you want to speak to this slide here?
Sure. So SHIP has an approach and a framework that we developed over the past few years to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it really is about moving away from performative allyship to meaningful action, which hopefully you will see from our experiences that we're going to share with you today, how we've been able to do that. We have been demonstrating this through integrating EDI into our culture, our values, and setting goals. We've committed to acting on our EDI action plan that articulates and measures over 29 activities now for deep, meaningful change in the areas of our people, our culture, and our systems. We want to ensure that our workforce will be broadly reflective of the community we serve, that our workplace will be inclusive for all, and we want to ensure that our systems will identify and address barriers within our organizational systems and the processes that we have in our organization. And we're going to be sharing some of the ways in which we do that with you today.
Thanks so much, Shireen. And so ultimately, why is SHIP here? So we recognize that we may not represent all of your organizations or sectors that are currently on this call. However, health equity and social justice is translatable regardless what sector you work in. So coming together and talking about this and having a committed stance on how we can move this forward is a collective impact. So we're all a part of that. And also we recognize we're not experts, but we're here to share our experience and also learn from all of you as well. So we just have a video here that will talk about equity versus quality.
I've come to think that most people believe that everyone deserves the same opportunity to achieve good health. That we should all have what's necessary to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. That we should all be given boots that fit. And that's when I learned the difference between equality and equity. See, one ensures everybody gets the same thing, while the other ensures everybody gets the something they need. Take 3 neighborhoods. Each one is situated across from the grocery store. One has no transportation system, and the streets aren't safe at night. One needs a boat to get there, and one is positioned a block away. Equality says, we hand them all boots and tell them to make do. One-size-fits-all solutions for problems that require more than one resolution. But equity, the quality of being fair and impartial, speaks to access. Equity speaks to safety. Equity speaks to transportation. Equity speaks to understanding. Equity speaks to the actual human condition.
So the reason why we show that video is because before we even begin to talk about data for change, data for equity, and how you can get ready as an organization and gauge your readiness to embark on this journey, we need to set the foundation for what equity is and what we're actually doing by collecting data, by using data responsibly. What is it that we're seeking? So I like to start off with this diagram, which takes us through, and it might be familiar to some of you, and I age myself a little bit because of this, but I'm okay with that. So this diagram is based on, I think, a book that I had as a child, and I also read to my son, The Giving Tree. And so it's very reminiscent, and I think it's a very good depiction of what we're going to talk about a little bit today. It shows us some examples of inequality and that journey towards what I like to talk about as being justice. So inequality, as we see on the top left corner, is where we have a tree with apples, and the tree is leaning to the left, and there's more apples on the left. And so the person on the left is able to access those apples more readily than the person on the right, who has no access to the apples on the tree. So that's what we would term inequality. And I think we're all familiar with that and what we saw in the video as well, where our services are not equitable and there is no equality between our services. What we want to move towards is from inequality to equality. Inequality, what we see is though the tree still leans to the left, the apples are more readily available to the left. What we have given to each person is the same thing. And I'm sure many of you have heard this before. Equality is where we give people the same thing, thinking that it will be enough to be able to give them access to, in this case, the tree. But what we can see from that equality picture on the right-hand upper corner is that even if we give both people the same ladder, the person on the right still has no access to the apples on the tree because there aren't enough apples on the right side, and the tree is still leaning towards the left. So if we move down to the bottom left, what we're moving towards is equity. What equity says is that we give people what they need. And I am sure many of you have heard this before. Equity says that you take a look and see what do people need to have access and meet those individual needs by giving people what they need. So in this case, we've given the person on the right a much taller ladder so that they are now able to access the tree and some apples on the right. But what do you still notice? With this example of equity, we still have inequitable access because the tree is still leaning towards the left. There are still more apples towards the left as well. So though we become equitable and provided what somebody needs in order to access us, there's still an equity inherent in that process. So the final diagram shows us what we're actually seeking. By building equity into our systems, into our organizations, what we are seeking is justice. Justice requires reconciliation. Justice requires system change. So if you think of us and our services, our organizations as the tree, what you see in the final depiction of justice is that what's actually required is that we fix the tree. We fix the system. We fix our organizations so that we are actually more equitable. And that is what we're all seeking. As we build equity into our practices, our programs, we collect data equitably about our clients in order to do so. What we're actually seeking to do is change the system so that the system becomes more equitable, and the system is then a just system. And we know that this is most effective because, as you see in the diagram, the tree has plentiful apples for everyone. We no longer have to give individuals something different from each other because what we've actually done is fix the tree. So there isn't that inequity where somebody needs something different or has to ask for something different. And that inevitably is what we're trying to do when we talk about data for change and data for equity, is use data collected in an equitable manner to create just systems for our clients and their families and our communities. Next slide, please. So we're going to use Menti throughout the course of the presentation today. Those of you that are not familiar with Menti, you can hold up, if you have a phone, you can hold up the phone to the QR code and it should take you into the Menti, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code 6184-3824 into what will pop up for you so that you can participate in our Menti poll. So I'll give you all a few seconds to get situated with the Menti. And you can pop in the chat if you're having any issues. We're seeing some folks there. If you can give it a thumbs up, I think there's an option to give a little bit of a thumbs up so we know that you're on there. That would be fantastic. Awesome. So we'll get started with our first poll question. So which of the following historical studies are you familiar with? The first option is the 60s Scoop. Then we have the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. We have Sims Gynecological Research, and we have Henrietta Lacks. So if you could put in, and there's more than one option. So if you're familiar with all of them, you can choose all of them. If you're only familiar with one or none, you have those options as well. So we're seeing a lot of people very familiar with the 60s Scoop. Fantastic. We've got around 10 people that are familiar with the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, and then 10 folks that are familiar with Henrietta Lacks, and then one person, fantastic, that's great too, who's familiar with Sims Gynecological Research. Yes, there is no option for none, but you don't have to choose any if you're not familiar with any of these studies. So the reason why we ask this question is because it sets us up for the foundation of the historical context of inequity and how data has been used historically to create inequities in our systems and in our communities. So for those that weren't that familiar, which there weren't many of you, many of us are familiar with the 60s Scoop, which happened and is in Canadian context in Indigenous communities. The 60s Scoop was really used to justify and sustain processes of colonization, serving as a tool to justify racist policies of subjugation. We use data collection through government agencies to use this against communities, to pathologize and take action against them in Indigenous communities. So the 60s Scoop is where we use data that we collected intentionally to remove children from their families and place them in the residential school system. So this is where you have a Canadian example of how data has been used to build an inequitable colonizing system. We turn to the Tuskegee syphilis study. Here's another example. This was in the States where data was collected and people were recruited Black men were recruited to participate in a research study around the progression of syphilis. And throughout the course of that study, these men were lied to, and they were not given accurate information. And this then prevented some participants from seeking treatment that could have eventually saved their lives. So once again, data was used as a weapon against a particular community who were asked to participate and were given incentive to participate in a study where then that information from their participation was taken to use against that community. Next slide, Nicole. The SIMS gynecological research, and many of us don't know about this. This is always very interesting to me because much of our practices today in gynecology and much of the equipment that is still used to this day in gynecological practice came from SIM. Dr. SIM conducted his research on enslaved Black women without anesthesia, without medical ethicists or historians, and others say that he was able to use enslaved Black bodies because they had no choice. And so what happened is that SIM was able to create our current practices or practices around gynecology for women that we still use today, while subjugating Black women, Black enslaved women, to unethical practices. And for some, and in some research, they actually call it torture. Henrietta Lacks was a Black woman. The hospital where her cells were collected was one of only a few that provided medical care to Black people. None of the companies and biotechnologies that profited from her cells passed any money back to her family. Her cells were very unique and served as the cornerstone for much of the research on our genome that we have to this day. None of that was passed on to her family. None of the profits was passed on to her family. If anything, doctors completely continued to fail to ask her family for consent. They released her name publicly. They gave her medical records to the media and published her cell's genome online without the family's consent. So once again, being a part of a research study where data was collected about her was used against that community in the long run. So why do we talk about this? Next slide, Nicole. Why do I do that part of that Menti? It's because much of what we're going to talk about throughout the course of this next year together is about the use and collection of data about our clients and people in our community who access our services who are very vulnerable. And so when we talk about how we go about doing that equitably, we do need to know more about why there is mistrust of data collection to begin with. Many communities that we serve mistrust us and are asking these questions that we are going to be asking them about themselves, about their identities, about their experiences. And the reason some of this mistrust exists is because of what we just outlined. Scientific racism is a thing. It has existed throughout history and has been used throughout history to create these colonized systems that we are now all a part of. I put here also the 7th generation principle from Indigenous teachings, where trauma experienced by one generation lasts and can persist and have an impact on 7 generations if we do not intentionally deal with that trauma and intentionally talk about that. And that for many of us is also known as intergenerational trauma. So we have to consider all of these things as we embark upon our journey into data collection, doing it in an equitable manner, and also then using that data to improve our services and our systems in an equitable manner. We have to be able to understand why people are mistrustful of us. And therefore, what we have to do as a system and as organizations to get ourselves ready to try to build equity and ultimately justice into our processes so that we can speak to this mistrust and the trauma that has been experienced by many communities. Next slide. Go ahead, Nicole.
Sorry about that. Couldn't come off mute for a second. So the importance on why we're asking demographic information. So oftentimes when we see a chart like this, we usually see the system at the top, and then it funnels down into our organizations, into the client. We flip the narrative on this, as what Shireen was speaking about earlier, and in the projects before this one here, is that the system often dictates what we're doing or how we get funding or how we should support folks. And it's really the client experience, and the client matters. So in other projects that we've been a part of, we've been part of we ask because we care. And we flip the narrative here at SHIP too. We ask because you matter. Without the clients, we don't have a service that we're providing. And so it's because of their experience, because of their willingness to want to work with us, is the reason why we're here and the reason why we're seeking social justice and health equity. And so by asking the client their information, creating that welcoming space and that inclusive environment will help the client to feel better understood, welcome, and included. Nothing about me without me cannot be as a fundamental right for individuals if we don't practice that in real life and instill it enthusiastically throughout our values as an organization, throughout our vision, our mission, our strategic plan. Because again, the clients are the ones that matter. And then when we adopt that, it can funnel into all of the other great things that we're working towards through our funding requirements, but also through the psychological health and safety of staff, because they are feeling included in that environment. So our second phase is, again, they'll have an overall picture of those who we serve. They feel invested, they feel included in that vision, in that mission as an organization. It's also going to reduce the documentation burden. We have so much administrative things that we need to be doing and documenting because the funding requirements or whatnot, but it does help tell the story. And then we can help and assist and support individuals with them guiding it, our clients in the community, by having this information. And so, and like I said earlier, it will really support the staff psychological health and safety, which should be a really key point of our organizations as well, because if we take care of our staff, they're taking care of our clients as well. And then we look at the system. How can the system really support with this demographic information and data equity? It's going to really support a continuous quality improvement. As a system, we need to be committed to that, as it really showcases what we need to work towards and move towards. It's looking at a piece of advocacy for health equity and justice, why we're all here today and why we'll be here together for the next year. It's really important to instill that in all the levels and all the work that we do. And then consistency and alignment. It cannot be so frustrating when we're all talking about the same thing, but we're not talking about the same thing. And so coming together today and learning from one another and from the capacity builders is to really support the next steps of our project here.
So we're here today to talk about organizational readiness. So we certainly need to start talking about what we can do to support the changes that we might need to make. And how do we assess ourselves as an organization to see where we're at? One of the tools in which we use at SHIP, and so I'm going to share a series of tools with you around how we did that at SHIP, how we've been assessing ourselves, how we've been looking at, are we actually building equity into our practices, and therefore showing that that impact is going to be transferred to the client and their services. So One of the tools in which we started this process with is an equity assessment tool. And I know that many of you probably are like, what? Where did you even get that? And we did that ourselves. Our EDI committee, we did some research when we started looking at this, and we weren't able to find a tool that we would be able to use effectively at SHIP to be able to assess the equity within our practices, our policies, and our programs. So what we did is we took all of our research and we created our own tool. And I think it's a very reflective and effective tool for our organization. This tool is something that's based on our principles of EDI that we have at SHIP. It has its foundations in our inclusive practice, and it also recognizes that we needed to speak to a lot of different people from a lot of different communities in developing this tool collaboratively. So the voice of those most impacted by our policies and our processes, our services, are embedded into this tool because they were a part of creating the tool. So we use our equity assessment tool, and this is just a snapshot. It is actually several pages that guides you through a process. So we use this tool on all of our policy review and on all of our new policy development, as well as any program specific tools or groups or programs that are being developed. And we also are able to use it when we're looking at things that are process pieces, like our access programs and our access pieces, our documentation, our application form that clients or families would fill out. We have been able to use this tool in all of those different ways. And that has enabled us to be able to look at, are we ready? Are we really embedding equity into it? Are we able to change and go through change processes when we identify using this tool that we have inequities built into some of our processes or our policies? Are we in a place at SHIP to be able to make those changes and actually build the equity into it? And this tool has been vital in us being able to do that and answer those questions for ourselves. Next slide. So the other way in which we look at equity and building equity into all of our practices, and this is another way in which you can take a look at data equity, is through surveys. Many of you are familiar, and we survey everyone all the time in all the ways that you can think of. And so many of our organizations also, are going through periods of sort of that survey fatigue, where people are not really wanting to participate. So how do we then build for people that idea that it's important, that you are important? And going back to Nicole and what Nicole was talking about with our clients, that we ask these questions because you matter. We take the same approach with our staff. We ask you because you matter. You are the foundation as staff of everything that we do. So one of the ways in which we were able to do this is we launched a staff belonging survey at a recent all staff day. And we chose to do it that way in order to get the greatest response and in order to provide people an opportunity to engage with us rather than just through an impersonal email or an impersonal Survey Monkey. And we did get a fantastic response. And what they told us wasn't necessarily what we wanted to hear, because it wasn't all great. But what they told us was truth. And so they had the opportunity to really give us the information we need to begin the change management processes that we needed to develop in the organization, so that we also know that as long as you pay attention to how staff feel about being a part of the organization and the work that they do, we will be able to improve their experience, and they will improve the experience of clients. And they will be more comfortable now asking clients about themselves when we develop that comfort and engagement in how we ask them about themselves. So that's just another way to look at, use a tool, and we developed the survey ourselves as well, to look at how do you develop tools that help you to get ready as an organization when you don't feel that you're ready yet to embark on this journey of asking about data and looking at data collection with clients. Start with your staff. start with the people that are delivering the service and the people that are going to be asking these questions of clients. Start there and build that relationship with them, and then gauge your readiness accordingly. Next slide. So another area in which we paid particular attention, and this was identified to us through some of the belonging survey, as well as through other surveys that we have done over the course of the past few years, was we recognized and we were told by our staff that we need to pay particular attention to anti-Black racism. And so SHIP as an organization took this very seriously, and we participated in a community collaborative process to develop and to participate in the Anti-Black Racism Survey across the Mississauga OHT, Ontario Health Team, of which we are a part. We were the organization that had the most engagement from this collaborative survey. We had 98 respondents to this survey, and the survey was conducted across the whole OHT. So even the hospitals participated, and even with the hospital participation, SHIP had the greatest amount of engagement. And so that also told us something as well. This matters. People in our organization are concerned, and this matters to them. If they took the time to participate in this survey and to give us their honest responses, they obviously think that this is important, and it is. And so we as an organization needed to respond accordingly. So on the next slide, please. So we did. We used the results to be able to engage in some processes to better improve and to continue data collection within the organization, but in a way that continues to build trust, but also looks at involving those who are most impacted in the process. So we have a BIPOC caucus employee resource group that has reviewed the survey results, and then conducted what we called, next slide, Nicole, and then conducted what we called safe spaces for Black staff. These spaces were a platform for Black staff to review and provide feedback on the action plan that was created from the survey results. We had sessions that were conducted by Black staff for Black staff, and the purpose was to elevate the concerns that were identified directly, that directly impact the actions of the strategy. And so we had a very collaborative process that we embarked upon based on the data that we collected initially from staff. So here's another way to look at how does your organization get ready to improve and to build equity into your practice, so that when it comes time to begin that data collection process for clients and with clients, you already have the foundations built into your organizational practices, as well as for your staff to recognize that if they're doing this for themselves, the next obvious step is to also do it equitably for clients. So these are just a couple of different ways that at SHIP, we embarked upon, building equity first and foremost into our organizational practices in order to then build that data equity culture that we're going to talk about in the next series of workshops. So I'll turn it over to Nicole to get us going with the next poll.
All right, so if you're still on that mentee slide there, it should pop up under what equity measures are you taking to create a data equity culture? And it should be an open text that you can write your responses. Just give it some moments here for people to be able to participate and write. So we have survey and client data, seek consent, including diversity in designing, surveys and tracking demographics on calls, open-ended responses, options to add additional options not included in responses, anonymization, self-reflection on gaps, We have IDEA staff group. Awesome. Ensure data collection offers consent and review, focus groups to review survey questions, survey from clients and staff. Oops, sorry, identifying who is not at the table.
I don't know if you can go down, Nicole.
It might not let me, it might flip to the next slide.
Yeah, it might not. I don't know if I can actually go down either.
So what we're also going to do with the polling as well is gather that data so that we can bring it back to our community of practice as well and share those resources, as some of these responses may really very well help and support your organization in some key areas that you can implement, which some of these may be easier ones or things that you're able to do now, or part of your strategic planning for in future as well. So thank you so much for participating in that. So in bringing it all together, Shireen will speak to the next slides on how we're going to tie in all of the assessment tool or the readiness tools that we spoke about earlier, and then what the next steps could be in how to align yourselves in data for equity. So go ahead, Shireen.
Thank you. And thank you for participating in that. And like Nicole said, we have a ton of responses there. So we'll bring those to the community of practice, and hopefully you can all attend that as well, where we can start to pick apart those responses and see if we can come up with some actions that we can actually take. So, and speaking of actions, these are some of the actions that we took as an organization at SHIP to assess ourselves and to look at where we were going and make some decisions about how we could change our processes. So I wanted to give you a bit of an overview. I gave you an overview of how you can start to build those surveys and data collection for staff and organizationally into your processes. But now, what do you do with that? How do you build the action pieces? How do you actually start to create change within the organization? Once you know a little bit about yourself, how do you gauge whether or not this is possible and where do you want to go? So one of the tools that we use is an impact assessment. We are a health service provider. So for us, we use a health equity impact assessment, which is a standardized tool, but you don't need a standardized tool, I guess is my point. There are some out there, and certainly to each of you from all different sectors, I'm sure that there are available to your particular area and sector, different tools that you can use. My point is really to just look for them. Look for those tools that are going to be able to help you assess impact of any change management piece that you're going to have, especially when it comes to equity. We are very fortunate in healthcare to have the health equity impact assessment that leads us down that avenue and really directs us to think about the social determinants of health and the impact of our services on folks' health outcomes. But there are other tools that are available to you in your particular sector, as long as they're looking at impact. And I think that that's what you're looking for. And I always say to folks that if there isn't a tool, we can develop tools. As long as you recognize that representation matters, as long as in your development of the tool, that you are doing it in an equitable way, that you have the people at the table that are most impacted by the process, by the service, by the program, by the group, that are a part of that development of the tool, that are telling you what the impact is on them, and you're building that into your change management. That's all you really need. So for us, we have like I said, the health equity impact assessment. And what we do is we use that assessment tool across all the programs within our organization to identify areas of inequity that exist within each program. And then we use those areas of inequity that are identified by the staff and by the managers of those programs to build health equity action plans for each of those programs. Those health equity action plans identify 1 or 2 actions that are reasonable that we are able to then do to do some work on, develop a mitigation plan and an evaluation, because you need to evaluate any change management piece to see whether or not it's effective. That health equity plan that is developed for each program is then what we focus on intentionally throughout the course of the year. And then at the end of a year, what we have is an overall picture of how we have been able to, or what have been the challenges to building equity into each program. In doing that, what we are looking at, what we are seeing is that we are moving our tree. So I go take you back to our diagram at the beginning. By doing things like this, we move our tree just a little bit more to the right so that it is straighter. I'm not saying that our tree is completely straight, that we have fixed the system entirely, but what I'm saying is that we're taking reasonable, measurable actions to be able to move the tree from equity to justice. And that requires that we collect data. This is a data collection tool. This is what the point is. This is a data collection tool. And when you're using tools like this with equity at the forefront of those tools, it makes it a little bit easier for you to then move your tree a little bit towards the center. Next slide, please. The other thing that we use at SHIP is called a SWOT analysis, and I'm fairly certain that many of you are familiar with SWOT. Oftentimes our funders require us to do SWOT analysis on our programs, but at SHIP what we have done is we have used a SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We have used this tool to do a SWOT analysis around EDI within our programs and whether or not our programs are equitable, diverse, and inclusive. So I use this tool with our 11 community programs, our 4 congregate programs, and our 6 corporate programs. And what we did is we used this tool to identify along all of the continuum of our services whether or not our EDI strategy was actually effective, what our strengths were, what our weaknesses, and the opportunities that we had for change were, as well as the threats or risks that exist for the organization when it comes to inequities, when it comes to practices that are not inclusive, or when it comes to a lack of diversity within our programs. So we were able to then take the results of this data collection process and really build those into our EDI and anti-racism frameworks and action plans, and to concretely speak to the issues that were identified by the staff who have the greatest impact in the organization. So this is another way in which you can take a look at your organization and look at how ready you are and where you are as far as opportunities to action things that are challenging or action inequities that exist currently in our practices. Next slide, please. Another one, and this is more around sort of meeting between the organizational needs and the community needs, is a community needs assessment. What we did at SHIP, and we have done this a few different times throughout the course of our of my time here at SHIP. What we have done at SHIP this time around is we hired consultants to embark upon a community needs assessment with different members of our communities, including clients, families, staff, as well as community partners and community organizations. So we were able to look at the community demographic data assessment, available statistical data about the communities that we serve, as well as our own client demographic data, which we will go into a lot more in our next session. Our next workshop will focus on our data equity, our data client demographic data equity process and culture. So they were able to take a look at not just community data, but our own internal data that we collect at SHIP. They were also able to meet with partner staff and clients and do engagement sessions with them. And then they looked at emerging sectoral trends. So we were looking at identifying current and emerging trends within the sectors that we engage with, or that may impact our ability to provide quality, equitable services. And we did a comparative analysis with similar providers. So throughout this process of doing a community needs assessment, we were really identifying and assessing the needs, not only in our communities, but also as an organization, to look at where should we be focusing our attention, and how do we ensure that we are meeting the needs of all communities that we serve, and not just the ones that we are most comfortable with. Where there is a need, that is where SHIP should be going. And so this was an opportunity for us to be able to really look comprehensively across the many communities. As Nicole mentioned in the beginning, we serve many different regions that are all very unique. And so because those regions are unique, we need to pay special attention to that diversity and to being able to tailor our services to meet the needs of those particular communities. So this is another way in which you can assess yourselves as an organization if you have the resources. We did our community needs assessments internally in the past, and it takes quite a bit of resource, but it is still possible to do it internally on a smaller scale potentially, but still being able to identify what the community needs are by even just engaging with partners or other community organizations within the communities that you serve that are also doing similar work or have similar impact. You could also embark upon engaging with partners to do something like this together and pool your resources to be able to do it. So I want to do, before we finish off, a prioritization exercise with you all. This is an exercise we also do at SHIP and continue to do whenever we have decisions to make about what our priorities are. The reason we want to do this with you is because we've talked a lot about how do you gauge your readiness? How do we assess ourselves as an organization to embark upon data collection in an equitable way with clients and with families and people accessing your services by first looking internally at your organization. And by building these pieces into your organizational practice, you are then able to gauge your readiness to do it with clients and with families and with community. So one of the ways in which we started off was to prioritize what was important and how we were going to go about doing this. So what we use is the 2x2 matrix, decision-making matrix, and many of you may have heard it was created by General Eisenhower in the United States. So it's also called and known by the Eisenhower matrix. He developed it when he was faced with constant decisions throughout the military career that he had, and obviously his career as president. And he had a saying. He said he developed a decision-making matrix to help him prioritize what he should focus on. Essentially, what he did, he layered two attributes by importance and urgency against each other. So we're going to look at doing something similar. What we're looking at is cruciality versus timeliness. So this is just the matrix and how it can work. And you can tweak this to identify to your needs as an organization, to how you choose to prioritize. So what we look at SHIP is cruciality. How crucial is it that we speak to this particular thing that we're trying to prioritize now? Crucial that we speak to it for our organizational benefit, as well as how timely do we need to be doing this in. So our matrix includes crucial, not crucial, do now, and do later. So you'll see in the boxes, what you're really looking at is something crucial and do now? Is something crucial, but we can wait and do it later? Is something not crucial, but we should do it now because it's a bit of a risk and it's a bit of a crisis? Is something not crucial and we can do it later, so therefore it's not that important? We might want to choose to delete it or delegate it somewhere else or disregard it for now because it isn't crucial and it isn't important that we do it in a timely way. So that's kind of just an overview of how you can use a prioritization matrix to make some decisions. Next time. So in those quadrants, I kind of went over it. each quadrant has a different, there's a different way to look at each quadrant. And so when you have gone through the prioritization, you'd go back to the quadrants and kind of take a look at what that tells you about the urgency and the cruciality of that particular point. You'll get the slides, so you'll be able to see. Okay, so we're going to use Menti again, but in a very different way. You're going to see when it comes up a slide bar, 2 slide bars, where you're going to gauge cruciality and timeliness. Okay, so we're going to look at prioritizing the measures that you can take to build data equity into your organization. So what you'll see here, and maybe Nicole can read it because I'm not reading it very well. I can't see it very well.
Oh, no worries. So it's asking you to prioritize the measures that you can take to build on data equity in your organization. So between the self-assessment of impact, the SWOT analysis, the equity assessment of policies, creating safe spaces, and needs assessment of community. So when you go on the Mentimeter, you're able to slide from 0 to 5 of how you can prioritize those measures within your organization.
There we go. So people are starting. I know this one takes a little bit of thought, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get folks to think a little bit about what your priorities are. Now that we've given you some tools and some potentially opportunities, which one do you think you could start with? Which one do you think you could do? Which is something that might be a priority for you that you're able to engage with a little bit?
So you can see as more people are answering, it's kind of shifting the table here, but seeing how people are really seeing the importance of engaging in some sort of measure within your organization, which is great to see. And again, maybe it's not all the things, it's starting with one, but even starting and thinking about doing one is the importance factor here. It is the alignment to health equity and social justice. It's showing that commitment, which is fantastic.
So it looks like, as people are putting in their responses, we are identifying that these are crucial. These items that we were talking about are crucial to your organizational readiness. But we're also seeing that it's mostly to the right-hand quadrant, the upper right hand, which, puts into question the timeliness. Is this something that we can do now? Is questions that you have to ask yourself as an organization. And that oftentimes has to do with setting the foundation pieces for yourselves first, and then being able to engage in doing some of these assessment pieces. So we see number 2, SWOT analysis is kind of on that line there where it could be crucial and do now. But and they're moving towards a little bit towards the left. So crucial and do in a timely way is, I guess, where we can end up with all of them. That they're all crucial for your organization, but you want to be able to do them in a timely way. So, and sometimes you don't have the opportunity or the resources to do some of these things right away or in a timely way. But that's where kind of doing those assessment pieces and then building out plans like we've talked about today really comes into play. You're able to kind of take a look at what you can do and then build out some plans, maybe for the year, maybe for the next, 2 years into your strategic plan. That's kind of where SHIP started as well. We built some of these measures into our strategic plan. When we built out our EDI action plan and even our data equity plan around building that data equity culture, we built a plan over the course of 3 years, aligning with our strategic plan. And I think that was really helpful for us, and not just gave us the space and the time to be able to do this, but it also gave us an opportunity to really build engagement into the process where we engaged with those that are most impacted. And that in and of itself always takes time. The other piece around this, and I go back to our conversation earlier about trust, recognizing that a huge part of this, of all of these assessments, of all of these tools that we've talked about, is around trust building. Building trust with your staff, building trust within the organization that we know is not necessarily always there. Building trust with particular communities, people that represent particular communities. All of that work needs to happen at the same time that you're looking at using some of these tools to assess yourselves. And that will be the same when we talk about data collection with clients and families. That will be the same. That trust building has to happen as well, before we start asking people questions about themselves and talking about, very personal information that sociodemographic information is. We need to build trust with them. And we also need to do that work around reconciliation, recognizing that trust has been broken because we operate in colonized systems. There is not trust there, even though we intend and we have great intentions when we build our programs and when we build our processes. The trust is not there because of that historical context, because of that 7 generations of trauma that most people have experienced from particular communities. So the work has to be on us. The work is ours to do in order to build that trust so that when we do embark on and we are ready to start getting this data around sociodemographics, that we're also ready to actually be held accountable to what we do with that data. So it's food for thought for the next session, and for sessions coming up, and potentially for the community of practice. But I think it's a good place to start if you look at what can your organization do now? Where can you start? Even choosing one of these areas and saying, hey, we could probably start on this now. We could start building those foundation pieces. We could start looking at how do we assess our staff? How do we survey our staff? And then we take it from there. So hopefully that was a helpful exercise for you all. And hopefully you're able to take something from it, from some of these tools that we've been able to share with you. You're on mute, Nicole.
I knew that was going to happen sometime today. Sorry about that. So some takeaways from today, and thank you so much, Shireen, for sharing that. I know it's near and dear to you, and I've really learned a lot from you as your colleague within the organization too, to know that this is important and why it is, and to instill it into my practice and being authentic about it, and how we have that as part of our access point to the organization, but also implementing it into all that we do with staff as well. And so some takeaways today can be learning and embedding the foundation of EDI practices is the first part to our organizational readiness. It will really help to create that foundation, and hopefully today has had you think about ways to create that part of your foundation and leaning the tree towards the right to justice. We are all working together towards social justice within our communities, and together we have collective impact. Sometimes it may feel that we're in silos, we work in different sectors, how can we align? But we're all coming to the common good of supporting our community, and how can we do that? We can do that together through collective impact. Every organization can make small changes to become more equitable. Just one small change can tip that iceberg, can tip that scale into social justice and health equity. And that is such a great thing, that even a small change can make all the difference to our community. And there are tools that your organization can use to assess your readiness for change, which is what we shared today. So we have excuse me, a bit of time for questions and comments, and then we have a couple of slides of what's coming up next for upcoming workshops, as well as just wanted to let you all know that we have a post survey coming via email after today's session. So please feel free we recommend that everyone participate in the post survey, because it does help us to align the next set of workshops that are coming up, and we really want to hear your your feedback and your recommendations. I think, Shireen, there might have been one if you want to answer. I'm just looking back. Are we able to share the tools was a question.
Yes. So what we're going to be doing, and Coastal mentioned that we're going to have a platform to be able to share resources and tools. So we'll be able to share those tools on that platform when it's ready. And I'm just going to be changing them because they are proprietary to SHIP. So you don't want SHIP branding on everything that you have. So we'll be changing that a little bit, but the tool itself will remain the same. My only caveat is that a lot of these tools that we developed ourselves are very specific to our needs as an organization. So I would use them as a framework and a groundwork to be able to build your own tools, and taking a look at kind of what are some of the areas that we have embedded in our tools. And maybe that can help you to build out what you need in your organization. Some of these tools are also very specific to healthcare because that we are a health service provider. So it really, like I said, isn't about the actual health piece of it. It's about the impact piece of those tools and how do you gauge and evaluate impact. The important part of those tools is that they're actually tools that we have purposefully and intentionally built equity into. A lot of us ask ourselves that question, and I've heard it a lot in any organization, that we say to ourselves, we're going to build an equity lens into that, or we're going to build an equity lens into reviewing our policy. What we did at SHIP is we asked ourselves, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to build an equity lens? Like, how do you gauge that you've built an equity lens into something? And that's where we started because we didn't know what it meant. What does it actually mean? Like, how do you know that you've done it? And that's why we embarked upon building the equity assessment tool, because those are the things that in that tool are the things that building an equity lens means for people within the organization from different groups and from different perspectives. So that's really how we built that tool, is to look at the meaning of equity lens for each of us, and for specifically focusing on folks from equity deserving groups, and having their voice come through in that tool. So happy to share it, and we'll share it on that platform. And then I see another question: are the tools aligned with the Ontario Anti-Racism Data Standards? Yes, they are, as well as a few other sort of very health specific, social determinants of health specific, health equity specific standards that we have in the field that we're in the sector that we're in. But yes, they are, as well as we're really aligned. We've tried to align ourselves as an organization with meeting those equity, diversity, and inclusion, belonging, anti-racism principles that, much of, we have available on the Government of Canada, but also within our own communities. There are organizations that do specific work, who work specifically and represent specific communities. So we have partnered with a lot of those organizations in our development and understanding. So in particular, Indigenous community, we make every effort to have that representation whenever we're talking about the calls to action, whenever we're talking about truth and reconciliation. We have Indigenous representation at the table that are guiding that. We take that very seriously. We partner with Roots, and we partner with Black serving organizations whenever we're talking about or making decisions about our anti-Black racism strategy and plans. So also take that into consideration as well when you're building out tools, to really ensure that the voices of those that are most impacted are a part of that process.
Please go ahead. Sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly.
Hi, I'm Lise from Find Help. There was one slide where you had YS demographic data, and you went from client to staff to system. I'm wondering if you could flip back to that quickly. There was just one thing you had under staff that was something like reducing documentation burden or something like that, that I was just curious what was meant by that. Yeah, reduce documentation burden. Can you just talk?
So within our organization, we have different services or supports that can provide a wraparound approach. And so rather than having all of the staff asking the same information, they can access it from the client record together and then be able to contact a client, for example, by their preferred pronouns, by their identity, really kind of understanding the picture of the client first, rather than having multiple people from the same organization asking them the same question. So we've heard a lot of that from staff about the documentation burden of them having to input it because of targets or standards of their separate services, but it's from the same organization. So I'm hoping that that makes sense. Shireen, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Sure. I think in our next workshop, we're going to take you through our data collection process, culture, as well as our dashboards. And so that might speak more to this, to your question, because our dashboards really are where we house the information about clients that staff can access without having to go back to the client over and over, as well as get that clear picture about each client so that we're able to then see if there's information missing that we can start to build conversations about. So when we talk about reducing documentation, it really is more about being able to have that documentation or have that information housed in a specific way that then alleviates the burden on staff from having to continue to ask the same questions or, input the same data over and over again.
And then we can utilize that in our system approach of consistency and alignment, that if there's areas that are not identified under pronouns or ethnicity or language, we can bring that to the system and say we need these as options so that people feel welcome and included when we're asking them these questions, because it's not a selection in our current database, for example.
That's great. Thank you both.
Welcome. Thank you for the question. Magdalena?
Hey, thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to ask you if you could speak a little bit more about the community of learners, the platform. I'm guessing this will be on demand in terms of I can access the information at any given time. In terms of my, how slowly or quickly I can go through things, because just taking into account the many styles of learning. If you can speak a little bit to it to get an idea of what the community of learners will look like.
That might be a COSAL question.
Yes, and we are taking into consideration the many different styles of learner, and we know that the formal way of learning is one of these formats, but we also understand folks are really value the engagement in smaller learning groups. So it will be for the first few series and more virtual, simply because of the array of agencies that are able to participate and to cover the large geography that we're offering the learning opportunities to. So. But we're happy to take feedback as well if folks have specific learning styles that they would like to see. We're happy to if you email us directly at dataforchange@findhelp.ca, we can definitely take those into considerations in the design mode. But thank you for your question, Magdalena. Back to you guys.
There's also, thank you for putting the email in the chat as well. So if there is some other questions that pop up after this presentation, please feel free to email them through. Shireen and I also co-lead our employee resource group for accessibility at SHIP. So we fundamentally really want to include that into our presentation. So if there's a way to do that going forward, please let us know. We're more than happy to support that. There was also a question, and I think this is going to lead to the next slide about what our upcoming workshops are in the community of practice. So there is questions coming in the chat about legislations about personal and client data storage for federal and provincial nonprofits, considering that data documentation strategy needs to have a good data security. And then will the resources be shared? Yes. So we will be sharing that as well. And there will be part of this series talking about the importance of data storage and what that means as an organization. And I don't know if anything else will be connected to that, COSEL specifically, but those resources would be available as well. Because it is really important to highlight that that is important, make sure that we are abiding by legislation, as I wouldn't want my personal information just willy-nilly anywhere. We want to make sure that when we're collecting this, there's also that commitment to privacy and security.
Yes, for sure. And we want to make sure we provide this information in a staged approach and it's not too overwhelming. And so as you guys are presenting some of the key elements to data collection, it's exactly what the whole series of full year engagement will do, is provide key important data considerations, legislation, and tools and resources throughout the year. So these are, I think we're starting the ball rolling together as we're asking key questions. And we're just finalizing. What we're hoping to do is have a website that's ready so that we're not having to use different websites and access endpoints. We're just finalizing that website. So by the time we get to the next workshop, we'll be able to share this this website, and all of the resources and materials will be uploaded there. So I feel that folks are eager to share it with their colleagues, and that's great. I think we're getting the ball rolling, but we just do ask for your patience as we're just trying to finalize those pieces on our end. Thank you.
Don't know if I missed any other questions, and I'm just double checking. Really appreciate the engagement coming on camera, off mute, and in the chat. It's really welcomed. I know we have a few minutes left, so just want to give it another minute if someone wants to come off of mute or off camera or in the chat.
Can I ask that lots of folks are doing this work and may have specific questions just related to your agency and where your agency is at? The email that we're providing in the chat, dataforchange@findhelp.ca, we can, as you're engaging with us throughout the year, you can also email us your particular agency question there, and we will try to triage it as much as we can to the right partners to answer the questions. But feel free to send your personal, not personal information, but personal agency question to the email, and we'll try our best to support you, support your agency through this work. So, I think, Nicole, we're almost at time. Shireen, there you go.
Wanted to end off with thank you, merci and Miigwech. Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate having the space to share what we've done as an organization and just some recommendations and thoughts so that you can have those for the upcoming workshops coming up, and really excited for Logical Outcomes in CASA to really highlight this capacity building as we work together this year, and looking forward to seeing you all at the next workshop. So again, if you have any questions, the email's there. Here is the slide about how to register, which an email will come out again as well. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.